Hello and welcome to Brick Speak. I'm your host, Brigadier Rakesh Bhatia. In today's episode, we will cover the debate which existed in China over importance of political work system. The two questions which can be asked in the exam are: a conflict remained between political work and professionalism in minds of leaders of CCP. While military commanders wanted the army to be professionally trained, Mao wanted dominance of political work over the military training. What was the impact of this controversy on performance of the PLA in 1979 Sino-Vietnam War? The second question could be: the Vietnamese army was also practicing political work, but the degree and intensity differed when compared to the PLA. Give out these differences and the implications when the two armies faced each other. Let's recall what we have already learned. 1942 was a year when war with Japan was continuing, which had started in 1937, where the CCP and the Kuomintang party had joined hands and they were fighting the Japanese together. Now, while the fighting was going on, there were new leaders who emerged in PLA challenging authority of Mao. Now Mao knew it that he has to fall back to the political system which he had mastered in last few years while staying at Yan'an. He wanted to discourage divergent views and renewed emphasis on ideological training, wherein there was a need to strengthen ties with the people and democratic work styles were to be implemented. The three basic principles of political work, that is, unity of officers and soldiers, army and the people, and ability to integrate the enemy, was reintroduced. All this has been explained in detail in the previous episodes, which I have put under a playlist named Political Work. Those of you have not seen this episode, I'll request you to go back and watch this to understand that what is a democratic work styles, what are the three basic principles of political work. You will be able to understand this episode better. Going ahead with today's topic, Mao tasked Ten Zeng, who was the political commissar of the Northwest area, to find out why the political work is deteriorating in PLA. In his report, he talks about five reasons for the same. I will explain these terms since they are mentioned in your book, so you must understand when the Chinese say these terms, what do they mean? Mountaintop mentality. Mountaintop mentality is a mindset that is characterized by sense of superiority, elitism, or detachment from reality. This, Tan Zeng said, was the problem of the leaders of PLA who suffered from this mountaintop mentality. That is, they were on top of the mountain and not bothered about those who are standing below on the foothills of the mountain. Formalism, that is, the leaders were very formal while dealing with the soldiers, which is against the tenets of communism. Egalitarianism, which basically means that effort to make sure that all members of the society are at the same level or status, was ignored. The leaders remained isolated from the cadres and they just gave empty calls and did not take any action. On the other hand, there were military commanders who had participated in the civil war, which started after the Japanese had withdrawn in 1945, fought the Korean War, where the PLA had gone in support of the North Korean army against the US supported South Korean army. There were also contests that were going in Taiwan Strait, where Chiang Kai-shek had established Republic of China. So all these campaigns demanded greater military skills rather than political demands. There were heavy losses in the Korean War. This forced Mao to take a relook at the level of professionalism in PLA. So he appointed Peng Doi, who was the military commander who participated in the Korean campaign, and he appointed him as the defense minister. Peng Doi, he divided the cadre into professional branches and assigned them tasks. Political quality of an individual and his professional abilities were separated, and he was rewarded because of his professional ability and not because of his political quality. Thus, the CCP Central Committee and the General Political Department lost their say in the affairs of the PLA. Commanders and not commissars were the final authority for promotions. Salary grades were included. Till this time, there were no salary grades. Soviet army, which was organized professionally, was taken as the model. With all this, Mao Zedong was not pleased because he was a political leader and his writ ran if the PLA is ideologically aligned with his own ideas. In 1958, in order to economically enhance the potential of China, a campaign called Great Leap Forward was launched. In this, Mao gave a call to make everyone a soldier, thereby creating a militia unit. Now, this militia unit was under the party control. See the hidden meaning behind it. Mao feared that the leaders may have greater control on PLA. To counter this, he had created the militia units, which were potential guerrilla forces. And thus, Mao reasserted the primacy of political work system in the CCP. Since 1956, controversies were existing between the politically oriented party leadership, of which Mao was the leader, and professional military officers. This was a major cause of friction between the nature and degree of party domination over the PLA. By 1960, the party machinery for control and indoctrination of armed forces had seriously deteriorated for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. That is the time Mao brought Marshal Lin Pao into the Military Affairs Committee, who in turn carried out serious reforms and indoctrination campaigns to strengthen party control and increase political loyalty, which in turn curbed combat readiness and professionalism. Then was a major event, that is launch of Cultural Revolution, where Mao launched a program called Learn from Army. He created an organization called People's Armed Forces Department, which were working in the communes and the industrial units. In a way, you can say the entire civil and bureaucratic units in China were given political training. PLA became first amongst the equal. Political work organs and roles in government and economic unit of the PLA had increased. PLA became a very active force in the great proletarian cultural revolution of China. Now, since the cultural revolution is spoken about, very briefly I'll introduce my viewers to what exactly the cultural revolution was. The Civil War, the Korean War, and the Taiwan Strait problems had demanded that PLA should be more militarily oriented. Mao was losing control on the PLA. So he wanted to reassert communist ideology, and hence he purged several senior leaders from PLA. He created an organization called Red Guards, wherein he mobilized millions of peasants to enforce Maoist ideas. This resulted in widespread chaos, violence, and political repression. There was disruption in education, culture, economy, school and cultural institutions were shuttered, and historical artifacts were destroyed. This caused internal division within the Communist Party and, by extension, in PLA. This undermined institutional stability and governance. The Cultural Revolution ended in 1976 with death of Mao. Then came Deng Xiaoping, and he carried out certain reforms. But were these reforms enough to make PLA again a professional army, which was to fight 1979 Vietnam War? What role did PLA play in this cultural revolution? They carried out political indoctrination, promoting Maoist ideology. They suppressed the opposition. They collaborated with Red Guard and were involved in spreading the ideology. Senior PLA officers were targeted as revisionists. They were set back to modernization because all the resources from military training and modernization were diverted to cultural revolution. And this impacted PLA's involvement in the cultural revolution, reflecting complex interplay between military and political objective. This had lasting implications for China's military and political landscape in future. Having explained the Cultural Revolution, let's now see how the military decline of PLA took place. The negative impacts of this was there was political repression, economic disruptions, there were educational stagnation, the society was in turmoil, cultural heritage was destroyed, and there was loss of trust in institutions that included PLA. The PLA was more involved in spreading ideology and not spending adequate time in modernizing its armed forces. 73% of PLA at one time were on internal security. PLA was also made responsible to produce and ensure supplies to large part of population. PLA was just carrying out police duty as economy had collapsed, leading to lawlessness in the country. To sum up, the almost 15 years between the outbreak of the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution in 1965 and start of the war with Vietnam in 1979 represented a long period in which political work was the highest priority of the PLA. Except for a small-scale operation to siege Paracel Island. Now, Paracel Island is in South China Sea, which the Vietnamese claimed from the South Vietnam government in January 74 and small unit exchange along the border with Soviet Union in 1969. The PLA performed its political work almost to the exclusion of its military function. As a result, it grew weaker militarily. Here I would like to inform my viewers that wherever we have put the text in a yellow background with a red margin, you must pay special attention to this as it would be handy if you memorize these texts. Now let's compare the PLA with People's Army of Vietnam. Both are armed forces of a communist country. Political work goes on in both the countries. In People's Army of Vietnam, the leadership was divided as in case of the PLA. Commanders led their units in military missions while political commissars monitored loyalty. In People's Army of Vietnam, the leadership system was divided. Commanders led their units in military missions while political commissars monitored loyalty, reviewed operational orders, and conducted political warfare while motivating the troops. They did not intervene into the military plans like in case of PLA. The political work system of Vietnam was tested during the 30 years of against the formidable armies of the world. In contrast, PLA had not seen any action after a war with India in 1962. While Maoists believed men were more powerful than machines, the Vietnamese army's political work system had been frequently tested. Hence, they knew that professional army will be more efficient than an ideologically trained army. Vietnam Army's ideological component and organizational arrangement grew weaker, whereas China it grew stronger. In Vietnam, whenever it was necessary, commanders ignored commissars and the party orders. Here I come to end of today's lecture. I will request you to please like, share and subscribe All the best. Jai Hind.